speaking of next version of the team, I mean, it kind of calls into question the future. So we've
Hmm.
talked about this season. We talked about where they stand, how the trade has affected them. But in the years going forward, there's going to be a lot to kind of figure out with this team.
Yeah,
So when it comes to the general makeup, I mean, I agree with you. I think they're definitely a better team with Brandon Ingram on board. You bring in an all-star, you don't go backwards. You improve on what you were before. Their offensive rating is going to be better. The defense is still going to be a question, but overall, I wouldn't expect him to finish 13th in the East again,
yeah,
at least if guys are healthy. If Brandon plays at least 60 games or so, I would assume that this team would be improved on what we're seeing right now. But there's also other questions. There's like, how does the bench look? Which of those other guys do they keep around? Grady Dick, I would assume, would be a part of the future going forward, regardless.
for
He's shown
sure.
a lot of
Yeah.
positive flashes in his second season. Jacoby Walter, I think, is a little bit more of a question mark, but there's a lot of moving pieces here when it comes to the bench. Do they re-sign Boucher? Do they bring him back? There's a
Hmm.
lot to kind of figure out here. So when it comes to the future makeup of this team, you bring in somebody like Ingram that's a few years younger than Siakam, but definitely a similar level of talent.
For sure. Yeah.
Where do you see them going? What are some of your general thoughts about like the direction they can go in? And how do you see things playing out a little bit for maybe some of the others that aren't a part of like the true core of the team, like Boucher or Jacoby Walter? What are your thoughts on some of those other guys?
Yeah, I think age-wise, they're big fans of the trio of Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, and Ochai Agbaji. I think they like all of those guys to varying degrees, obviously, and I think that Grady is a huge part of their future moving forward. With Jacoby and Ochai, it's more wait and see how they develop over the next couple of years. But I think they envision them as part of their quote unquote core in the next couple of seasons, just as bench guys that can one, hopefully play defense at a high level eventually, and two, be shot makers and guys who can knock down threes for them at a high level. So those three are really important for improving the 3-point rate of this team. Like I mentioned, like just getting them to shoot more threes. And that will help as guys who can come off the bench and kind of play different positions for them. They have Scotty, they have Ingram, they have RJ, three wings who are not necessarily known as the greatest shooters, but you have three other wings waiting in the wings, no pun intended, to be shot makers for you, right? So I think overall, there's a world in which those three are part of the vision moving forward. That being said, I think a lot has to do with this draft. As truthfully, I think a lot of Raptors fans are, and to be honest with you, the way the Raptors front office has talked over the last couple months, they understand the importance of nailing this 2025 draft, whether that be getting the 7th overall pick or getting the 1st overall pick or getting the 3rd overall pick. There is an importance to nailing this pick because I don't think they have intentions of tanking or losing anymore. I think they're pretty much done with the whole let's suck season. I think they're more interested in being competitive moving forward. I think a lot of their players, and, we just talked about the financial aspect. This is a team that, at least from a finance perspective, should be competing more often. And so when you have a salary cap of like 4 or 5 guys making $150-160 million, yeah, you need to be competitive. And so I think they eventually will. I think next season is a season where they're going to try to go for the play-in, maybe try to be a playoff team, especially in the Eastern Conference where there's tons of inconsistencies there in that range of teams. I think, honestly, if they were healthy this season, they probably would have been a play-in team. But overall, I think that's their goal. It's being able to be competitive next season and put their full foot forward. What that looks with that pick is going to be intriguing because if they land the number 1 overall pick, then it's okay. It's how do you incorporate Cooper Flagg into the situation, right? Because you have tons of wings. Where does Cooper end up playing? You get the 2nd overall pick. It's like Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey or whoever else you like in that spot. There's kind of that equation of like, how do those two play a factor on this team? And so overall, I think they just need to nail this draft, and that will hopefully change the trajectory of this team in a positive way and add another talent to this team. You think of like a group, like you mentioned, that's really unique, right? With the way that they can play and kind of, there's a lot of duplication there, but maybe there's a world in which it can work. They are missing one piece to be able to be really competitive and intriguing. That one piece could be obtained at the draft.
In the draft. Yep, exactly. No, my thoughts exactly. When it comes to this draft, yeah, I think it's a little bit more in question than it was maybe say 6 months ago
Yeah.
in terms of overall talent. But But still, I mean, if you're going to be a top 5, top 6 in the draft, I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to go and get somebody that you can pair alongside the guys you already have.
For
There's
sure.
not a ton of pressure on them. They're coming in, they're playing alongside Scotty Barnes, they're playing alongside Brandon Ingram, guys that are established contributors. So obviously, there's going to be a level of expectation there, but you're not counting on them to kind of carry your team in any sort of way or to, just do anything crazy. You bring them in and say like, hey, this is the role we envision for you, and you see what you got there.
Mhm.
So I think that provides a lot more upside to this team, because some people might look at the core they have right now and say like that's not quite a championship core, but we have to allow for more growth from Scotty, more growth from guys like Quickly, that draft pick that comes in, regardless of who it is. I think there's a lot of talent there, possible talent in the top 5, top 6, top 7 that the Raptors can add. And like they can really do some damage here. So
Yeah.
they can start to kind of make that gradual build up to what they want to be, which is eventually title contenders. So for sure, I agree with that. And then the point you brought up about their salary cap, I think that's very important to keep in mind. With as the money goes up, so do the expectations for a team.
Yeah.
So, you look at a team that's already going to be over the cap. They're probably going to be flirting with the tax. You're going to need to be at a certain level, which I would say is at least fighting for a playoff spot at bare minimum with the payroll like that. And they're going to be in the mix. So I do applaud the management for Toronto for taking a swing, because players like Brandon Ingram, they are. It's tough to draft a guy that good.
Mhm.
First off, a guy that's an all-star, and then for a market like Toronto, and I mean you live there, so I mean I'm sure you know that like Toronto's a solid market, but again they're not Los Angeles, they're
Yeah,
not
they're not a free agency
Chicago,
destination, that's true.
right?
I mean, you
Right.
can just look at the snow that's, right here, and you could see
Yeah,
that they're not necessarily the biggest free agency. Look, it's
yeah,
true, it's true. I think that's part of their calculus when trying to acquire guys. I mean, the way that they kind of function in general is buying low on players because they know that they're not gonna be attracting those players in any sort of way because of the fact that it's Toronto and it's Canada. And I think that's just the reality of the situation with the Raptors and the way that they build teams. Some teams, like the Lakers, can just trade for Luka Doncic. Other teams
yeah,
have to buy low on players and hope. It's just the way the NBA works. There's certain markets that have to go about things different ways, and the Raptors, got to go about it this way.
yeah, exactly right. So we'll see how it goes. It's definitely a risk.
Yep.
Ingram has to stay healthy. The guys have to fit together. But no, if it works, I think we're going to look back on this deal and say, like, I mean, they were really onto something here when it comes to reorienting their team.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's also just hard to be bad for too long.
Yeah.
You go and look at Detroit and what they suffered through for years, Sacramento before they got to be what they are today. It's really hard to have a team that's consistently at the bottom. Charlotte, I mean, it
Yeah.
seems like they're just going to be there forever at this rate. But no, for Toronto, I think they had a couple of years where they're near the bottom and they're ready to jump back up. So I think kudos to them for seeing an opportunity, jumping on it, and
Yeah.
retooling their team, kind of like OKC did, where they had a couple of years to where they were in the lottery, but they were able to retool quickly, and now they're a title contender again here in just like 3 or 4 years. So
Absolutely.
maybe Toronto could go be on that trajectory and really get back to relevance here in the near future. So there's a lot that could happen in the next year or two, but I think in the meantime, there's a lot more hope, a lot more optimism, and somewhat of a direction when it comes to like what Toronto's doing.